That's you. Can I say a warm welcome from Table Tennis Scotland? My guests tonight all have a wealth of experience as players, coaches and non-playing captains. Steve Gertson and Mark Lundberg are regulars on the Monday night show, but making her debut tonight is Lisa Notterangelo. What have they all in common? Well, they are all national selectors for Scotland, and that's going to be our main theme tonight. But before we talk about that, it's important we go through our birthday list. In the last few weeks, Tom McKenzie of Pennycook, one of our prominent coaches. Tom runs fantastic sessions. He now resides in Spain, splits his time there. So happy birthday, Tom. One of our ex-directors who's also moved to Spain. There's a common theme coming up here, isn't there? Paul Jackson. So happy birthday, Paul. You had a birthday last month, last couple of weeks. But more recently, we've had Glenn Edgar from Edinburgh. Glenn was in my squad when I was national coach in the 80s, but in the 90s or whenever it was. And finally, is it his birthday today or was it a couple of days ago from Dundee?
A few days ago, I believe, Dave.
A few days ago, a big 18th birthday to David Hay. Happy birthday, David, from all of us. Okay, I believe you've got a car for your birthday as well, so well done there. Okay, before we cut into the nuts and bolts of tonight's show, some very, very important announcements to make. Or important squad training announcements to make. And I'm just going to hand straight over to Steve. And he's got some interesting news for us.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Looking forward to the show tonight, guys. Good to see you all again. Yeah, got a couple of good things happening this week. It's been all over social media the last week or so around sort of the Home Nations e-camp, which we're calling it. So on Saturday, Sunday and Monday this coming week, Scotland have got together with England and Wales. It's actually been headed up by an all-Welsh party of coaches in myself, Ryan Jenkins, who's working for Table Tennis England now, and his brother Stephen Jenkins, who's obviously the national coach in Wales. So really looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting. First time that we've done a Home Nations online camp. Originally, it was meant to be a face-to-face camp, Dave, wasn't it? We had plans to get together in Nottingham and invite maybe 6 juniors to go down there and train with Wales and England, but obviously that wasn't able to happen. But luckily, as a result, now we can invite a good few players. I've got 21 players signed up for Saturday, 19 players for Sunday, and 21 for Monday. So really encouraging response from young under 13s up to some seniors coming into the session as well, or later junior years as well. So really good. It'll be a mix of interesting stuff. So obviously some players have robots and tables in their house, so they can do some exercises through the robot. Some obviously are not that fortunate to have that equipment, but they'll still be able to join in with some imagery on shadow play techniques that we'll be running through over the weekend, and a lot of fitness as well, specific table tennis fitness sessions. So Ryan's taking Saturday, I'm taking Sunday, and Stephen Jenkins is taking the Monday. And then we've also got the couple of the volunteer coaches from Scotland as well coming in, the likes of Roy Claxton, Ian Rind, Lisa's come in to show support and offer help to our juniors. Who else have I missed? Missed someone, but it'll come back to me. And yeah, before that takes place this week, just want to announce that we've got tomorrow night, we've got a national junior squad. A national junior squad of the players coming in to do some fitness, shadow play. Martin Johnson is going to lead the fitness element for our junior squad tomorrow night. So looking forward to that. And on Wednesday as well, we've got a coach education workshop with 28 coaches signed up for that workshop on Wednesday night, with myself leading that. So yeah, busy week for Table Tennis Scotland, for the coaches and for the players. Chris Main was another one helping us on the weekend as well. And there was another one, but I'll come back to me. But yeah, so we've got an exciting week ahead anyway.
Stephen, do you know how many there are from England and Wales and Ireland? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, well, it's the Ryan Jenkins is the lead coach for, I think it's called the Aspire squad. And I think he has 18 players in the Aspire squad. So I believe that sort of age category is from sort of, if I'm to roughly guesstimate, sort of around 14 to 16 years old, that type of bracket. They have a few different squads in England, but he leads up on that kind of middle group, I think it is. So he'll have about 18. And I haven't seen the numbers for Wales yet, but I know Stephen Jenkins is saying, Anna Hersey's going to be leading some of the fitness from the Welsh perspective. So, and I expect there to be a fairly good number from Wales as well. So, yeah, it should be a really good mix.
Yeah, any from Ireland? Have we got any from Northern Ireland?
No, Ireland are not involved. We do have one from Jersey. Hannah Silcock is coming. She obviously has been involved in our national squads in Largs. So I invited Hannah to come along, and she's going to be getting involved on the table. So from Jersey.
Stephen, it's really good that obviously you've worked in Wales, you've worked in England, but probably there'll be a lot of new faces from Wales and England that you don't know, and you'll be a new face to them. Stephen Jenkins is going to be a new face to some of our players. Maybe Ryan is, and I think that's excellent. So they get this broad breadth of senior coaches throughout the UK. The other thing I wanted to ask you, where is that there's a lot of safety involved now, isn't there? You can't just grab your bat and in your house, and you've got to make sure that where you're playing, you've got a safe environment, no obstacles. I think you've been involved in that as well, haven't you, Stephen?
Yeah, more so from a lecturing point of view, in terms of doing a lot of fitness classes with the students at Murray College, UHI. So yeah, I had to put a lot of kind of park cues and risk assessments in place for that, or sort of earlier stages of Table Tennis Scotland. But I was speaking to even Senga today, who does the sort of child protection issues around sort of just some kind of disclaimer around sort of similar to what you do at tournaments, isn't it? Around sort of people taking photos and permission to consent to go on maybe social media and stuff like that. So that's something that we'll be looking into that this week when I send the links out. I'll be mentioning that when the formal invites come through.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some good news and bad news with Stephen as well. The bad news is he's closed his bed and breakfast. The good news is it means he'll have more time for Table Tennis Scotland. Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, not officially kind of closed yet. We're still hoping to do one room on Airbnb for any. There was quite a few that were going to come up for coaching and stay with me before this we got shut down again. Couple from England, couple from around Scotland. So I still have a room ready for anyone that wants to come up for coaching, and a kind of an Airbnb type setup. So yeah, but closed down most of the business. Yeah, unfortunately, this has been made us rethink our plans a little bit. So yeah,
we've closed as well. And does that mean, on a serious note, you would be more available to do clubs from Dumfries, Edinburgh-ish? Would that now give you more time to make yourself available?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy going down, with the regional development days I've done for Table Tennis Scotland over the last few years. The guest house hasn't stopped me doing that in the past, but it has taken away quite a lot of my time, especially through peak season, summertime, that 4 or 5 months where it's busy. So yeah, that does free me up a little bit more to look for other avenues and to look to get more involved in table tennis in Scotland and beyond. So yeah, exciting.
Excellent. Okay, that I hope everybody's got a lot of information there. And obviously, if you've got questions for Stephen, and obviously there will be questions for Lisa, Mark, no doubt. But again, let us have them, and you can get your answers instantly. I did forget to mention Matt Norbury, but I think I mentioned him twice. And Mark, I called you Matt last week, didn't I? So,
yeah, I'm sort of getting used to it, Dave. It's what you're going to do each week. It keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, so anyway, we've got
Dave,
Matt.
Sorry, can I just give it? I knew I forgot one coach, and it's annoying me, and I don't want to miss the Dundee coach out. Callum Riddick is going to come and help me at the E-Camp as well, just because that was annoying me. I knew I was missing one. Sorry, the button.
Do you know, Stephen, see when you mentioned Chris, I was like, it's fact that you mentioned him late, because I want to know if he logs in on time for the session. The whole of Scotland and all the players in Scotland want to know if he's going to log in on time.
Nah, he'll be there. Yeah, he won't let me down for sure. He'll be there. Good old Maney, he's top guy.
Okay, we are 4/7 of the National Selection Committee. It's a very responsible position. It is our job to select players to enter various international tournaments. We select under 12s, cadets, juniors, seniors. We're not involved in the selection of veterans. We also decide which tournaments would benefit us, which tournaments we can afford. Sadly, that is quite a large consideration. And we also have to select the captains and the non-playing captains, or in some cases, when we selected people like Neil Cameron, he was a playing captain. So we have that responsibility. And as I said in the introduction, we've put together a team of selectors that I believe had a wide breadth of experience in different aspects of table tennis. And what I can say is you don't always get it right with selection because it is subjective. Those of us who are watching cricket at the moment, we won't know until tomorrow whether Joe Root should have declared a bit earlier or not. But we'll know that with hindsight. And selections like this, because sometimes, I think most of the time we get it right, but it is impossible to get it right all the time. Okay, but we do it with a lot of preparation. We meet and we discuss all avenues. And these are the things we take into consideration. We look at performance. It could be a medalist, like the British Championship. It could be promotion from the European League. It also could be relegation. So that's the first thing we need to look at, is what are we selecting for? Do we select potential, non-medalists, mid-table? Do we select long-term? So there are events where you might want to select potential because it's somebody younger who's got a long time in the game, but you might want to select people who are actually performing, and that would depend on the event. You've got to look at your team members. Are they supportive, enthusiastic? Peter Charter spoke about this last week. Helpful. Do they turn up to squad training? Are they unselfish? All these, no one thing, but all these things weigh one way or the other. Are they good travellers? Have they learnt to eat foreign food? Are they homesick? Again, all these things might come into a selection. Are they able to win at home, or are they able to win abroad, or are they potential to win abroad? Age versus experience. You might want to, it is possible you could have a 35-year-old who's actually got no experience, and you could have a 21-year-old who is a seasoned international player. So all these things we considered. The style of play. It may be, as again, I think Pete Charters mentioned, you could go to some places where you know they're weak against backspin. So therefore you might want to put a backspin player in your squad. You might want to put a serve and return player in your squad. You might want to put a counter hitter in your squad. I mean, Peter Simpson used to say that he always liked a backspin player in his squad, even if he lost all his games, because what used to happen, the players had spent so long beating the backspin player, the games were all messed up when they came to playing Des or Paul Day, or whoever the two topspin players were. This is really important. You know, good ambassadors. Behaviour, are they a credit to their association? Are they smart? And do they set a good example? 2 years ago, we were in Spain, in Alicante, for the World Championships. And Colin Dalglish, our champion, he was having an awful tournament. The ball was falling off his bat. He couldn't put two shots together. And was in the hotel lobby, and there was an old lady just about to walk out, and Colin ran to the door, opened the door, and to me, that was honestly, I was so proud of him, more than any ball he ever hit on the table. Absolute gentleman, great ambassador to Scottish table tennis. Long or short-term commitment. You may, if you know somebody's retiring at the end of the season, would you want to take them to that end of the season tournament? Maybe you do, because you've got to get that vital win, but maybe you don't. The players may have exams, and that might affect selection one way or the other. Injuries as well, or do players break down? You know, can players play for one match? Can they play for 1 week? Can they play for 2 weeks? Are they mentally tough? Are they strong under pressure? Sometimes you don't know until you've taken them away. And the preparation's also important. Anyway, they're just some elements that we have to consider when we're selecting players. Later on in the programme, I'm going to give you a list of things we need to address when we're selecting the coaches as well. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark.
Thanks, Dave. Some really important things, I think, that when we try to select players, obviously bear in mind, and as you've rightly pointed out, not the most easiest task. But my first discussion point for my fellow selectors is that when we're looking at a whole range of events, so if we're weighing up Scottish table tennis, we're not world beaters. So let's be honest, we're not going to win a world medal currently. Maybe in 5-10 years' time with Stephen leading some coaching, we might get there. But when it comes to home nations, for example, the last home nations, we were British champions. So I wanted to get selectors' opinions. And maybe if we start off with cadets and juniors, when we're trying to select a team for, let's say, a European youth, for example, what is it we're looking for as a cadet player? Are we looking to build a squad to take us all the way through to seniors? Or are we selecting players based on rankings at that moment? Are we looking at basically at their age at that? How many years left do they have in a junior, for example, of selecting a team? Lisa, just to throw you into this one to start with, as first time on our show, what's your thoughts on that when we're looking at European youth, young players, when we're building a squad?
Yeah, it's a funny one, and as you say, it's a really, really difficult job. There's no right or wrong answer, and I think no matter what you do in these situations, always someone that will be disappointed and someone that will be very happy, no matter what decision you make. I think when I think of like younger age groups, maybe not as much juniors, particularly in maybe more cadets. I don't know if it's just me, but I more think of, I'd be more driven by not specifically rankings, because I think rankings are one element, but I think even, I suppose, recency of results. And, you know, because you could get a player who's just outside the ranking, but actually they've won the last 3 tournaments. Or they've had some 2 really big results the last 2 tournaments. And if it's a 3-man squad, you might be tempted to say, you know, that would be the kind of player you'd give a shout. But I think at younger age groups, I do tend to get more drawn by sort of rankings and sort of recency of performance rather than having a full long-term view. I think for a junior, it might be different. I think a junior, they're going to be moving up to seniors pretty soon. And for that, you may then give a sort of bit more of a view of who are the ones that are going to make the step up into seniors and building more of that team squad. But maybe minor cadet level, I'd be more minded to select based on not necessarily purely ranking. I think that came up last week when you guys were discussing, when I was watching, that a ranking list is a good base, and it gives a good indication of results, but it's only a system and it probably can't be the be all and end all. And I think particularly for younger kids, recency of results, improvement and attitude are also things I would consider. It's kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah.
No, I think...
For the very, very youngest, I wouldn't necessarily consider too far in, because you don't know what's necessarily going to happen. But I think when you get to sort of later junior years, I think that building that team becomes more important if you want that to become your senior team of the sort of future.
Absolutely. Stephen, what's your thoughts on building a team from cadets to juniors?
Yeah, I think, you're always looking there at potential. You're looking at possibly, things that, at least I mentioned there about good attitude. Dave mentioned earlier about, playing styles. Are they, are they showing encouraging signs at that age that, they're going to have a game that's going to be strong at a junior, senior level? Are they trying to do the right things? And that might not necessarily mean they're getting as good a results as some other players who are getting away with maybe a certain level of play or a certain style of play, which can possibly only take them to so far. So although I think ranking is massively important, and we as selectors, look at that all the time, I think it's also about at that age very much sort of the attitude, how dedicated they are to the sport, maybe the amount of time they're training in their clubs, the communication, what are their coaches seeing in them? Are they fully invested in it? Are they passionate about it, loving it, what they're doing? So I think there's such a range, and Dave, massive long list there of all the things that can be taken into consideration. But I think at that age, looking for a kid, a boy or girl who's really enjoying play and wants to be part of the team, is a good team member. And I would base that from my perspective on what I'm seeing at the national youth squad. How well are they fitting into the team? How well are they training? And their playing style and sort of their character and that sign, the early signs of kind of that good mentality and all the other stuff that links to that sports psychology part of the game as well, which will, you're not expecting them to be masters of that at that age, but that if they're looking pretty solid there, if they're not going to be too beat up if they get, which can happen in European youths. We get some bad losses there. It's a tough level. It's some players go there like rabbits in headlights, and they're going to lose some matches, of course. And I think you're looking at that age, right? If they lose a couple of their first matches, are they going to be able to keep going and kind of move on and not dwell on that and not, so it doesn't end up becoming a really awful experience for them? Because I think, at that level, against all of these top European countries, that can be daunting for players. So you're looking at it from that kind of perspective as well. That are these players ready to go and potentially lose some matches, but still bounce back and keep trying and fighting for Scotland to try and get the next win?
Brilliant, Steve. Totally agree. I think just something to pick up you said there about European youths and the rabbit in the headlights. I've been in that situation. I've been to 3 European youths. Where obviously Wales, where you saw similar situations, we're fighting for places 30th, 40th, rather than at the top end. But I think the feedback from coaches, and it'd be interesting to get Dave's opinion on this, is that we obviously we're going to talk about coaches later on, but ultimately as a player at that level, at cadet and junior, how is that player reacting at the tournament? And I think back to my first European youth with Gavin Rumgay, was teammate. We actually were friendly with Adam Robertson, and Gavin Jones was the Welsh team. But Adam used to study the table because that was the level he was at. So we used to come off the table and be like socialising to some extent. We're only 14, so we can only socialise so much. But actually Adam would be back in the hall looking at the other players, top players playing. So I think what's important is that when players are away on these tournaments, the feedback that comes back from coaches, you can identify potential in a player because they don't want to be away from the training hall, for example. They always want to be picking up what they've learned in the hall. Dave, what's your thoughts about that? The feedback, basically, as a selector, taking feedback from a coach from these young tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, what I feel very strongly about, and normally when I speak to parents on the selection, is if they go to, well, I'd say for seniors as well, if you go to a big event, there's 3 things you should be doing. Obviously, you're playing. That's pretty obvious. You'll get picked for a team or you may be on the bench. But it really is important to watch these world-class or European-class players. And 3, I think it's important to spend time in the training hall. Obviously training, but again, also watching the players. I have had issues with teams when as soon as they're knocked out, they're all by the pool, nice bronze, good-looking players, but not learning an awful lot about table tennis. But I think we're better organised these days, and you've got to make the most. You've got to make the most of the fortnight, and I'd say it to the coaches as well. And I think on my Zoom cast a number of weeks ago in the mid-80s World Championships, half an hour before the final, I was in the practice hall watching Save and I just can't remember his name now, but it'll come to me, practicing, and because they was going on to play the world final within 10 minutes, and they was in a practice hall, and in that practice hall there was forklift trucks moving tables, there was building, dismantling. Honestly, it was chaotic. But both these players, I can't remember, who did Save lose to in the world final? Come on, help me somebody.
Hopefully our viewers can come up with that. I'll Google it any second. So any viewer that knows the answer, stick it on YouTube.
Quiz, that is tonight's quiz. That they weren't phased at all. They just practiced, wasn't bothered about the forklift trucks, wasn't bothered about the, and so that was a good learning lesson for me. So therefore, I hope when the coaches go to these events that it's not just about coaching the players, it's their university as well. So they can, and watch the top players practicing, speak to the top level coaches, and then watch the matches as well. But I'd also say it's important, not to get overload. I mean, when I was at the World Championships last big event I went to, which I think was Budapest, it's so important to get out the hall and have chill time as well. So it's all about striking the balance.
Just on that, because Mark mentioned Adam Robertson and Gavin there, and you mentioned there about being students of the game. I think back to Adam and what can be achieved from kind of Wales, Scotland are relatively small table tennis nations, of course, compared to the bigger picture. But when you look at someone like Adam Robertson, who was a few years older than me, he got to a final of the European Youths. Rumgay, I've seen beating Christian Zeus in a European Youths, a top German player. It shows that smaller countries with a good mindset, with a good attitude, and being willing to study, learn, and have self-belief and put the practice in. I know we've gone a little bit off topic there, but just wanted to highlight that all that it can be done. And you've got people like Anna Hersey coming through from Wales again, and obviously England have their own. They've got their own things going on, a lot bigger picture. They're on a bigger scale, but it's important messages, I think.
Steve, totally agree with you. I think if you actually look at other examples of smaller nations around the world, Luxembourg, their table tennis system. Yeah. There was an Icelandic player that I grew up with who was Michael Mays' doubles partner, Gudmundur Stefson, who was tremendous. And I think it's about actually where we want, as selectors, we want a problem. We want a situation where you're looking at 10, 15 players that are all maybe in the future looking at medalists. But absolutely, there's a starting point. And I think the purpose of these Zoomcasts, for example, is actually, this is what we're looking for. So actually go out to the players and say, make us work as selectors. Follow the things that we're saying to some extent to help you in your career, and I think that is an important point. Just because we're small doesn't mean that we can't be mighty.
Yeah, and I think just on that, sorry, Mark, to jump in a little bit, but we're talking about European youths here, but for some of our players, it is just a case of getting down to England and start competing in England against some of them boys and girls, and our target at the moment probably is at home nations level, and then what's next after the home nations, and you kind of thinking more about that kind of pathway. Sometimes we expect too much from players at European youth level when they haven't really got experience just playing an English tournament yet. And it's getting that kind of pathway and progression right as well. It's important for us.
And the player was Gatien.
Jean Gatien.
Used to play with his blade for many years.
We all, left-handed. So that's about that. Driving me mad. Right, shall I go next, or Lisa, have you got anything to add at the moment? You're on mute, but
I'm on mute, but no.
Have you got anything to add, Lisa? You quite happy at the moment?
Yeah. No, nothing more.
Dave, sorry, Dave, might be a point just to get Ben Hart's question out the way. Just when we're talking about younger players, just on YouTube, about to see what Lisa and Steve's and yourself, what your thoughts are on the ideal split between talent and hard work. So it's a tough question, Ben, and I missed these questions. So Lisa, Ben quite well, so let's start with you. As someone that's worked with Ben, what would you be looking for, that split between talent and hard work?
Hard work. It's the eternal question, isn't it? I'm a big fan of hard work. I think it's always I've seen a lot of players, I suppose, when I was coming up who got to be pretty good, I would say, almost top level, and they didn't start very good. You wouldn't have said they were, I suppose, talented. If you were forced to see them as a child, you wouldn't have necessarily said that, but you got the impression they had a really strong work ethic and were clearly putting the hours in. My view on it is, I think, it's got to be a lot of hard work. I've seen a lot of talented players who didn't get to full potential because they didn't have the work ethic. So I think you can be talented and have a bit of a natural flair for the sport, and it gets you a little bit of a head start. But if you aren't committed to putting the work in, I think it'll catch up with you. I think a little bit of talent and a lot of hard work is quite a nice combination. But I think someone with a lot of talent with with quite a poor work ethic, they're going to stagnate, I would say, and they're going to see a few hard workers with maybe a little less, as you would say, talent, whatever talent is, catch them up. So I don't know if that's a roundabout way of saying.
It's a good answer.
It's a cracking answer, to be fair.
I think regardless of if you've gotten, I would say I was definitely not a talented table tennis player. I have probably no natural ability whatsoever. I was a relatively hard worker, got to a medium level. I think a bit of talent would have helped me maybe go a bit further than I did. But I probably had a decent work ethic, and you got to probably a decent enough level. But I've seen a few players peter out through coaching who you would have initially got them in the training hall and thought, they're just, really great timing, really natural play, but they got to a certain level, and when you need to step it up, you need to put the work in. So I think a little bit of talent, a lot of hard work from my perspective.
Brilliant. Steve, I think Lisa nailed the answer. You got anything to add to that?
Well, I kind of, a little bit from a coaching perspective, I suppose. And when I look back on maybe mistakes I've made as a coach, because I've given too much time, more in my younger days as a coach coming through in Wales, there was a couple of instances where I rewarded players who were quite talented, picked it up quicker than others, and I sent them to a lot of tournaments in Sweden, Germany. This one boy that stands out in my mind who was pretty talented, and I look back at that, and he didn't have a good work ethic in the training hall. I look back at the kind of the messages that sent to the other players in the squad, but I kept picking him for, like I say, a couple of big events back then. When I was coaching in Wales, and I look back on that, and he ultimately gave up the sport. Whereas these guys who were sort of working hard every week but going a little bit under the radar, potentially still involved in the sport a little bit further down the line. And that, for me, all about the hard work now. And I think if you're successful at anything in life, it's normally about the hours you put into something. There is definitely some kids, for example, who pick things up quicker than others. But you need a lot of both to be really successful. But the amount of deliberate practice and hard work and everything else that goes into being an elite athlete, it's all about that journey and putting the graft in to ultimately get there. So yeah, it was a great answer, Lisa.
I think Dave's probably seen so many players over the years with his experience that had that talent. I think of modern day players, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying it, is that John Hannah, I think I said it last week actually, John was outside the sort of top 3, 4, 5 as a junior, but he kept working hard. And the reason that I bring John up, because I've seen him in the training hall, how hard he works, and now he's in our thoughts as selectors. Sort of the way that he's got himself up in the rankings is somebody that we talk about. But if you just based it on talent at that time and said, is that player going to be someone that we're going to select in 10 years' time for potential Scotland teams, you would be like, I doubt it. But that hard work paid off. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, just using as an example. But I think Dave's probably seen so many players out the years that as juniors, and maybe look at them and say, don't know if the talent's there, but if they keep working hard, potentially.
What is often said, we're looking for the talented player. But I attended a lecture not too long ago when the keynote speaker said we should be motivation spotting rather than talent spotting. He said talent will come and go, but motivation will stay. So maybe as coaches, we should be looking at players who are highly motivated, because they are more likely to be able to take the knocks, handle the pressure. Because sometimes when we look at talent, we're really just talking about hand-eye coordination, aren't we, really? And we're talking about movement, biomechanics, etc. But that's only one small part, A world champion is the person who gets knocked down and he gets up. He gets knocked down again and he gets up. He takes a beating and he gets up. And it's also worth noting as well is if you look at the Scotland youth football team, the England youth football team, probably the England and Scotland youth cricket teams, it's not the same people who play in the senior events. It's the ones who have been able to carry on playing, learning to handle pressure, learning to be good time managed, all those extra things. Now, if you get a combination of talent and hard work, you get a Desmond Douglas, or you get a Jill Hammersley, or you get a Gavin Rumgay or Ewan Walker, for example. But talent alone will not get you that far.
Agreed, Dave. Agreed. Back to you now. What's our next subject? What have you got for us?
Well, it's I'd like to ask Stephen, because what you'll find is, as I say, it's a contradiction. We know this when we're selecting. And also, selection methods can be different. Some countries, I've worked at countries where I've been the sole selector. I organise the squad, I train the squad, I pick the players, etc. Most countries that I've worked for, there has been a committee of which the players are selected. But if there's 4 players selected in a 3-man team, it is up to the coach to select the team. So the selectors do not ever say once the players go to tournaments. That's been pretty regular in the countries that I've worked for. But I have worked for, different, lots of different systems. Normally, with a selection committee, the head coach is normally on that committee. And although everybody's vote is even, the person who is going to take the team, his vote must be considered perhaps, or his opinion must be considered more than anyone else's, because he or she has got the responsibility of taking the players. And Stephen, you've been on selection committees in a number of countries. How have they worked?
Well, 2 countries, yeah. So in Wales, I was on selection committee for about a year in Wales. It's a funny one because I was on selection committee in Wales when I didn't live in Wales. So I just left. I worked for Table Tennis England for about 3 years, and then I left to go back to Greenhouse Sports in London. So I was living in London and working in London. And Ryan Jenkins, who was national coach then, asked me to join the selection committee. So a lot of my input was through emails, Dave. It was through just looking at results online, and I use it now, but now even I'm looking at, 365, especially British League results, Junior British League, Senior British League, although Table Tennis England have moved away from 365 now. It was a good system to just go and see all the results, see players' averages. So I was kind of on a selection from that kind of capacity. And then I was going through and running some training days for the Welsh players as well, at that point as well, just on a sort of freelance basis as well. So I was seeing them in the training hall, not seeing them so much in tournaments, but then just keeping an eye on results. And there was about, I think at the time, there was 4 or 5 people on that Welsh selection committee at that point. But it was all kind of, they had face-to-face meetings in Cardiff, but I was just offering input on an email and putting my thoughts forward in that way.
Good. Right, so if I can go on to the next bit, is obviously if we've got teams going away, we obviously need team captains, we need non-playing captains, and we need responsible people to take these teams away. And that will vary once again, according to the events that we're entering. I mean, we might send a large group with somebody who has good managerial skills because he's got to organise large groups of players with the coaches. It might be we send a specific coach who's got a specific area of specialisation. If we're sending a backspin player, we may want to send a backspin coach. We may not want to send a back. In fact, we could send Ewan Walker as a non-playing captain because he was very good against Chop. So all these things might dictate the kind of captain. We might want to send an ex-international player who's got the experience on the table. He's been there and done it, and probably he could be fast-tracked into becoming a non-playing captain. Or we might even want to send, which we have done, a current international. As I mentioned earlier, we've used Neil Cameron and we've used Chris Main on more than one occasion because they're bringing modern thinking into the captain skills. And sometimes we might want to send an administrator. Their knowledge of results, they're very objective. It could well be somebody who just watches table tennis. It could be a psychologist and the knowledge of what makes people tick. Or we may even bring in an outside coach because an outside coach is often clear thinking and objective and doesn't have a fixed opinion. So even selecting the captains and the non-playing captains for these things is quite a difficult task. Right, thoughts on that then?
Well, just especially, Dave, like just on that, obviously it's sometimes we have issues with players, I suppose, who can't go to certain events because of costing, because of missing, and it's the same with coaches, isn't it, as well? We're asking volunteers to go away for maybe, European Youths 8-9 days, and it's Lisa, for example, who's working full time would find that difficult, I'm sure, to give up days. So, all of them things are right that, and all them things are taken into account, and it's a really important role, isn't it? Being able to sort of mentor and look after the support and care for the players, not only in the table in the venue, in the sports hall, but out with as well, and all the other issues that you face, especially taking young kids away who are maybe emotional and, like you mentioned earlier, being homesick. And yes, it's a kind of like a parent out there as well as a coach, and you really want to look after them. And all of them things come into account, but it's sometimes it's it's who's available as well, isn't it? Ultimately, who can go, So it's it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I can just come in here, man. I mean, there have been times because of availability. If you've got a very experienced player, I'll say Gavin Rumgay, Craig Howison, Ewan Walker, it is possible you could go away with somebody without table tennis skills at all, because they can look after each other, but they don't want to be turning up for jury meetings and having to do the draw and look at the pigeonhole. So in some cases, you could send somebody who has neither been a player or a coach or a tournament organizer, who is just a sensible adult because of the reasons you've said, Steve. Because of cost. And the only thing I didn't mention, and it is important, I'm going to embarrass Lisa here, is when we won I know I mention it quite a lot, but I think it is worth mentioning. When we won the British Championships, and it's great it wasn't played in November because it means we at least keep it for 2 years. I mean, Lisa was probably the most important member of the coaching team. She was always there. Even when Colin was playing in the final and the bus was going in 10 minutes, and I'm thinking, damn, I'm coaching Colin, the bus is leaving, and Lisa says, look, I'll go and see. And that took the pressure off me. So having a good team of coaches is so important. And Lisa's one of these who picks up on things. Whilst there was Ian Rind and myself, we were busy rushing around, and Dylan as well. Often Lisa can spotted those missing gaps, and it's vital to have, as she does on our training camps as well, you know, and she really is one of the most important members. Sorry, Mark and Stephen, if I'm, you know, but she's been a really, really important asset to both the selection committee as a non-playing captain, and also you probably found Lisa a big help in your training camp, Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's what has made the training camps in Largs. You know, we had recently, we collected feedback from the players on them, didn't we, just before Christmas, and it was so positive. And I think, like you said, the team of coaches that we've had working with us there, you know, Gordon, Ian, Lisa, you know, Dylan De Silva, they're regular faces. I think that's important as well. I remember when I worked with Table Tennis England, you know, we used to work with a set squad, so we would be captain for a set. So I was captain for the girls for one season, Nikki Jarvis for junior boys, Jai for junior boys, sorry, Alan Cook for junior girls. And, you know, you were always with the same team of coaches, and that's just what's happening kind of with our camps, and that continuity. Players are used to seeing you as well. And then that helps sort of create a better atmosphere as well. So Lisa and all the other guys who were giving up their time, you know, voluntary a lot of the time to do these things, I think, you know, deserve a massive amount of credit, because there is an amazing amount of volunteers in Scotland. And, you know, like I said earlier, with that coach education workshop I'm doing on Wednesday, to have 28 coaches who are willing to give up their Wednesday night to come and learn and talk about table tennis, that's what we need, isn't it? And yeah, it's really, really important that we keep building that team of coaches, not only at national level, but at the grassroots level, where it's probably even more important, and we keep working together to develop that.
Yeah.
Just sorry, Dave, just to come in on three things, actually. Number one, we all know who Dave's favourite in the committee is now with Lisa. Let's be clear about that. Yeah. The second thing was I've actually forgotten the second thing now. Sorry, apologies. But just obviously come in with just the point regarding the coaches that basically. I'll tell you what the second thing was. I've actually got it. Zoomcast bingo. Dave, when you mentioned that we won the British Championships, it's like when the viewers say when I used to play with Gavin Runge, it's like they have a drink at home. So anytime we mention any of those things, people have to have a drink at home. That's what I wanted to start with, actually, as an activity, Zoomcast bingo. Sorry, the other point I was just going to add there about the difficulty of sending a team away to European use if they've not been away to any tournaments. And this is a central thing about training camps. I remember as a junior, trips down to these tournaments in England that Stephen mentioned previously. I'm sure they're important as when he was a junior in the Welsh team, the British Schools Championships, where you're going away. I think the toughest thing is sending a group of players away for 9, 10, like my first European use, we're away for 3 weeks because we had a training camp in Slovakia before it. It's difficult, and actually bringing different characters from different areas all together. And if you've not been away together before, it's a real issue of that team building exercise. And I've seen a whole manner of issues over the years of teams not blending together as a group, the people falling out. And I think that's important of what the coaches bring to the table, is spotting that, what you identified with Lisa, spotting things, the continuity, as you mentioned, Steve, of a group of coaches that are all seeing the same things. But certainly from a player's perspective, that is so important that they've been away together in camps, tournaments, because the last thing you want to do is send them away for a big tournament and they hate it because it's a long way away and a long way from home.
To what's incredibly important there, Mark, what you've hit on is you think that this might be a small problem for Table Tennis Scotland, but I also sit on the Commonwealth Games as a performance director, the committee there, and there's been real issues at Commonwealth Games in other sports where players were getting homesick because they've not spent time away. And there's also issues with parents wanting to get into not in table tennis, let me say it, not in table tennis, but in other sports. And so what the coaches of all these other sports were saying, and the chef de missionnaire, probably haven't said that properly, is that, you know, it is important that players go away from home, eat different food at logs, or wherever, because some of them probably haven't done, learn to eat different foods, or they're going to starve if they wait for a week. Sharing rooms with other player, spending 24/7 with the coaches and the players. And then when they do go away to the big events, then they've at least had that training. And that's why we do it. It's all a balancing act when you're selecting, but if there's two players of a similar standard, then one's been going to all the training camps and joining everything, and the other one haven't. Come on, who are we going to pick? Put yourself up for selection. Make yourself available. Play in the tournaments. Go to the training camps. Don't be invisible. And then the selectors will notice you. Mark, question for you. You made your debut as the team captain with the seniors. It was it probably was in Perth, wasn't it? So how did that go?
I found that it was also a massively important experience for me of a career in table tennis, where you think as a player you want to achieve, but then as a coach or a captain or whatever it is, it was a great honour. Especially being from Perth and doing it in Bell Sports Centre. As anyone that's involved in Scottish table tennis, well, Bell Sports Centre, I would say, would be the home of Scottish table tennis to some extent, with all the tournaments that are there. But for me, working with the players is that they were fantastic. I mean, I was captaining Colin Dalglish and Rebecca Plaistow, so you couldn't have more professional. So that made your life a bit easier. I think you as a team, as you took the role as sort of team manager that evening, giving everyone a briefing beforehand, where the lead up to the occasion, where going on to that match, the players are ready, where yes, there were small bits as in the match of being a captain that I could identify, but the main thing was the players took responsibility, so it made my life a lot easier. And I'm sure Lisa's been through that as a coach, Steve's been through that, is that your life as a captain is made a hell of a lot easier by the professionalism of the players. They knew exactly what was expected of them. So, and it was against Wales, and I'll hand over to Steve in a minute just to talk about how we absolutely hammered Wales that evening. So,
I was well. I'm going to go off. I'm just going to pick up on that. I'm surprised you said that with Colin Dalglish, because I had to read him. I shared a room with him in the Gold Coast, and I had to read him a bedtime story most nights because he was missing his mum. So I was surprised you.
Well, the difference between that, Edinburgh and Perth, only 30-40 miles, Steve, so the Gold Coast to Edinburgh is a bit further away.
No, but to pick up on your point about Wales, I've coached against Wales many a times, coaching for England and Scotland now as well, and very professional, Mark, when it comes to coaching against if it's rugby, or if I'm watching them on rugby, a little bit different, but coached against Wales many a times.
Let's have a conversation on Saturday again.
Oh no! Oh yeah, actually we both won on the weekend.
I tell you what I'd like the viewers to know, which really, really is important on selection, and that's probably the perfect match. So why did we send our top two players, Colin Dalglish and Rebecca Plaistow, to play what was a B international? You may ask. Well, I shall tell you, shall I? What the selectors, both Rebecca and Colin, had a really poor championships in Alicante. They both struggled. Good players have good tournaments and bad tournaments, and we felt, that they needed a win. They needed a win. I believe if they would have had good tournaments in Alicante, I don't think we would have picked them. But both Colin and Rebecca played. They both got wins, and then that got them back on a winning trail. So there's different reasons. There's so many different reasons, and all these things are looked at. Don't know if you can remember that, selectors, can you, when we picked the team?
Yeah, Dave, actually, that was one of my points that obviously come to tonight, of actually selecting a team for the match that you're playing in. So it's fine selecting it for internationals and tournaments, but it's important we've had to select teams for internationals in Edinburgh. We had the international at Haddington. We had the international at Bathgate, but we know we're not playing against maybe the top players, but ultimately we want to select a team that's going to win, because we don't want to lose. But at the same point, we want to bring development to the players. So, and that's a difficult part of a selection, where we had a long debate in the meeting. I don't know if you remember them, Lisa. I think you managed to miss them, Steve, being up in Inverness. But we had, we also, as you know, Steve sends his thoughts in before, so it's not like we leave him out of it, by the way. But we had long debates about what we should do, and ultimately it's for the good of the Scottish team. But at the same point, we don't want to send out, for example, if our team was Zuzin and top player, and that was a standard, and we're playing against another nation, we need to try and match that up. But at the same point, look after our own team as well as developing players to then. And I think the advantage, what we did for Colin, what happened but within 12 months, did Colin not win the British Championships? His confidence was up. So I think as a selection, I think we would commend ourselves and say that was a good idea to do that. Yeah.
No, and also regarding selection, we've had some wonderful matches against Wales and Ireland. But again, if it was the European Championships, it would all be shrouded in secrecy. But these kind of matches, I speak to my counterpart in Wales, Stephen Jenkins, or Aaron Thompson, Pat Hunter in Ireland, and say, look, we'd like to have a friendly match. And we try and match the sides. Will you be sending your first team? If you do, then we'll send it, so it benefits both nations. And that's this unity and making the best out of an international. And especially as we can then say to our guest, Wales or Ireland or whatever it might be, look, after you play this international, you can play in the Edinburgh Open, you can play in the Perth Open, you can play in the West of Scotland Open. So they get a full weekend of table tennis, which also enhances the West of Scotland, the Edinburgh Open, the Aberdeen Open, or whatever the tournament is. So it's a complicated business, this selection business. It isn't just straightforward looking down a ranking list and picking 3 or 4 players. Anyway, have we got any questions, Mark?
Yes, I think a good question from Paul Silcock is the panel has mentioned the European youth can be a big challenge for Scottish juniors and cadets. Can Table Tennis Scotland help find development events to bridge the gap? And that's been a big debate as well in our selection meetings, hasn't it? We're obviously trying to find an event where, my own thoughts very, very quickly, the prestige of sending the European youth. So if you're a player, basically at the end of the season, if you got to the European youth, it's the pinnacle, but actually it's maybe not the right thing for you. Sending you to an event in Luxembourg, Belgium, Sweden. Steve mentioned, obviously, with the Welsh team, that's what they did with certain events. So, Lisa, what's your thoughts on sending to other events rather than the big European youth where there's a chance we're going to get spanked?
Yeah, it's been a point of contention, hasn't it? There's been many debates about this one, and I'm kind of with you. I think it's a tricky one because I think, particularly for our juniors, and it's the ultimate, isn't it? They want selected for the European youth. It's seen as the pinnacle, but the reality is it's a big jump. And as we've alluded to, I don't think we have enough. I don't think we allow them to gain enough international exposure, even at doing things like entering like a 4-star down in England. Before then, there's a massive jump to say, right, you've just done domestic tournaments, you've not really had much of it, now you're going to European youth. And it's massive rabbit in the headlights. And maybe, some players will react fine to that. Other players, it could put them off because it can be very, very scary. And yeah, we've had this sort of debate. And I think my personal view as it is I would probably build it up. And once you start going down to 2 stars, 4 stars down in England, and you start winning matches at that level, then looking at smaller European events, as you've alluded to, Mark. I know there's events that we've looked at before, like, Luxembourg, Belgium, which are just a bit of a level down. Some of them are combined with training camps as well, which would be a nice kind of getting players into an international event without it being too scary. And maybe start doing that at a younger age, particularly, doing that from sort of minor level, cadet level, so that maybe by the time they're a junior, they've built up a decent bit of exposure, and then that can maybe get them into the European youth and be a little bit less rabbit in the headlights. But it's a real difficult one because I think you have to have a good alternative to be offering as a sort of top selection goal, because you can understand why a lot of players will place high importance on the end of the season. I want to get to European youth, and it's maybe slightly changing the mindset to say, right, okay, maybe eventually we'll get there, but you know, end of season you'll get to go to this tournament in Sweden, and getting them to accept that that's actually the right thing, and it's maybe not right to jump straight to European youth. Would be my personal view. Can
I just come in on that? I think it's excellent points, Lisa. I'm fully with that. I think, you know, what Dave's brought in, talking about the seniors there with the home friendly internationals against Ireland, against Wales, you know, that's something we probably need to do, think about more at a junior level. You know, this weekend potentially would have been that happening in Nottingham for sort of that under 16 bracket, that type of thing. You know, going forward when things become back to normal, I think is something we can look to do more. But also we can organise. But also, like Lisa said there, you know, going down to a 4-star, going down to a Grand Prix. Finding a junior British League team. Now, if anyone wants help to find the junior British League team, they're more welcome to email me, and I've got some contacts, and Dave has, I'm sure, and I can look to find them. You know, any junior wants to do that. I would love. Obviously, we want to see players play tournaments in Scotland. We want to see them go to England and play these tournaments more and more. Get exposure there. It's not as expensive. But when I look back at my junior career playing for Wales, I was very fortunate. I got to go to a lot of European tournaments, not European youths. I'm not talking so much about that tournament, but a lot of the littler tournaments like in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, training camps, tournaments, all over from as young an age as 11, 12. But it was always if I go back to financial reasons, it was always a set fee of £100, no matter how long the trip in Scotland are not kind of, you know, it's still a big expense for my parents, of course, to pay £100 every time I go to a training camp or a tournament abroad. But Scotland are not in that fortunate position at the moment. So, you know, going to England, competing against the home nations, and then definitely there's something Scotland need to look to do is giving them more exposure to the smaller tournaments around Europe, and then, you know, building up. But the European youth is such a great incentive for the players as well, so it does keep a lot of them inspired, and I'm working hard to try and get in that team. But then when we're there, you know, are they giving a good account of themselves? And it's a difficult one. It's a lot to expect from
them. So I think we've touched upon it there. I think Billy Main's coming with a question about Scotland sending teams to British Junior League 4-star events. So Lisa and Steve mentioned that. I think from a selection committee, and I'm sure from Table Tennis Scotland's point of view, from the board of directors, is that if it was easier money-wise, then we would send players to all these events. I think there's no doubt about that. But I think the important part, or the difficulty of a selection, is we want to keep everyone happy of this is the event that we can send a team to. However, we need to make sure it's the right team. Whether it's an international against Ireland in Bathgate, or whether it's a European youth, it's the right team for that event. And I think that's what makes it difficult. But for the questions coming in and the points obviously you guys have touched upon, if we had that ability where money was there and it wasn't a minority support and it's not just because Table Tennis Scotland doesn't have money, it's to do with table tennis as being a minority sport. I think if we had the same of badminton, cycling, the same sort of image that it does in Scotland, it'd be a different story. Of course, we'd have players to all these events, but I think we have to do the best of what we've got, of where we send these players to. And that's a difficult job of selection committee. And Dave, more than anyone else, as I like to call him, maybe the godfather, I think is the oldest one in this group, is the fact of he's seen that more than most over the years of trying to organise that for players.
And I think what is completely different, and it was new to me when I came to Scotland, is I could take a team away when I was working for England, who I worked for about 9 years as the national coach, and the fourth player might not have even got a game because of the circumstances. Now, when I came here, sometimes everybody's paid £500 to go to an event. Now, if somebody's paid £500 or more, then it's damn unfair that they're just going to sit on the bench for a fortnight, and therefore it makes it difficult. So I think what I do try and do when I select players, when we've selected players, then I phone them individually to tell them. I will at least say, and anybody can come back because they know it's true, I'll say, look, you're basically selected as the fourth player, but the captain on the day may pick you, but he may not. Do you still want to go? You know, so they're left under no illusions that they could end up going it never happens in reality, to be honest with you, because what tends to happen is you'll play some very, very important matches, and then there'll be matches which are, you're already promoted, relegated, you're already in the mid-table, and that's a golden opportunity to play your fourth player if it's a three-man team, if you haven't played them already. But it is important though that players know, because it would be a hell of a culture shock to go to a big event and find yourself not playing at all. Yeah,
and I think that's important, Dave, as well. Just very, very quickly on when you're selecting a player at that, what we're mentioning earlier, being in the team. Steve coached the team in the Gold Coast, so flying out to Australia, Commonwealth Games. You obviously coached big events as well. I think if you selected the right player, they already understand that and they fit well into the team. They know their role is for that team. So I think more than anyone, if it was the critical match and it was the fourth player sitting out, it was a team of three, more than anyone, they want that team to win. And that way you know you've selected the right player, because they want, ultimately it's for the team and it's not about themselves.
Yeah, and if I could just mention, before I sort of hand over to everybody, it's also about non-selection as well as selection. About 2.5 years ago, it was now, I went to London to meet with still our number one player, Gavin Rumgay, from a world ranking point of view, and spoke to him about playing for Scotland. And I spoke to him about the events that I expected him to play in. But then I spoke to him about the events that I didn't expect him to play in. In other words, if we was having a friendly match in Edinburgh, then I wouldn't ask him to come all the way from London to play it, because it would be no benefit to him, no benefit to Table Tennis Scotland. So, the managing of players. So where we brought Colin Dalglish into playing one of those matches is a confidence booster, as to get him winning again. Quite the opposite with Gavin. I said, Gavin, I only really want you for European League, for World Championships, and promotion and relegation as well. And he's always played when he's been picked, and he's always put on a good show. And when we went to Switzerland, I sat in the hall training, and Gavin just took the training. So I sat there chatting to all my old Swiss friends. It was brilliant. He put them through the warm-up, set a level of training. So yeah, so there may be non-selections which are just as important as selections. Right, let's go around the table. First of all, are there any other questions on YouTube? And then I'm going to go round. Any lasting thoughts on the evening?
Only questions is if someone's talking about how Stephen Gerston's kept his good looks over the years. I don't know if his wife is watching from another room.
Good Photoshop.
Yeah, good
Good
Photoshop.
I've actually bought this, Mark. This is what I bought recently. That's what's keeping me in nick. Fitness bike. That's what it's all about.
My camera doesn't turn, so I can't show you my one. That's a shame.
It's the Highlands. You got to move up to the Highlands, get the fresh air. That's why I moved out of London.
Here, personally, that far away, I'm the closest to you. No, I don't think there's much more on. I think there's been some really good debate. I think some really good comments from viewers on YouTube tonight. Some really good contributions. Actually, sorry, there was a couple of questions that hopefully covered off that were sort of put on the web, that were put on Facebook before. Let me just find them again. 1 second. It was all about regarding selecting the right players for the right event, and surely it wouldn't go on. Surely you would select based on rankings and then anyone else. I hope we've covered that point off for you, that it's not actually just based on that. Let me just get who asked.
Which one would you pick off? Would it be ranked in Central or three? Oh, we won't go there.
Oh, Stephen, it was just over last week. So Andrew Milne asked that question about select best players based on the results. Do they not? Well, hopefully we've covered that off tonight, that there's a whole magnitude of things that we take into account.
Mark, sorry, can I just what is important is the Olympic selection, because there are legal challenges. People can put in their objections or challenge if they've not been picked. is the criteria for Olympic select or British Olympic selection is purely on the world ranking. So if you're in the top 3 and you're in the top 100, then to simplify it, you automatically go. So it is out of the hands of the selector. So that is, I mean, I don't, whether I like that or not, that's the way it is.
Yeah, it's set out beforehand. Everyone knows what they're getting into, and there's no surprise.
Some people think that's good, yeah.
And one question from Ian Ferguson was, does Scotland have a centre of excellence? Do the players go abroad as a squad to prepare for big events? So no, Ian, I think what we've obviously covered off tonight. What we do have is the great work that Stephen and Dave does, and with all the national coaches that have been mentioned tonight, just for the camps that we do. So I suppose we do have a centre of excellence in a way that we have a youth squad, but for a senior level, not so much. But however, it's something with as Dave has touched upon throughout, in constant contact with players. Steve does the same. Lisa, within her area, is obviously making sure that players are communicated to and understanding what they're doing right now. And I think it's a credit to Steve, I'm sure we'd all agree, is that Steve's been a driving force throughout this whole lockdown period of keeping table tennis relevant in Scotland with his online courses. I know I gave him a big up before, but I don't mind doing it again when we were on a session before. And it's still continued to do, of keeping basically table tennis in the focus for everyone. So well done, Steve. Keep up the good work. And I think final point for me was just to mention the selectors that are missing tonight, Dave. Ian Rind, I hope I've said it right this time. He gave me a telling off for saying his surname wrong, and I had to explain to him that's my whole life of people saying my surname wrong, so you better get used to it.
Me too.
Yeah. Sinclair Houston, Gordon Muir, are also fellow selectors, and Richard Jewell sits on our meetings but doesn't influence us. Is just there as a note taker. So I haven't missed anyone else, have I, guys? No. That's it from me, Dave. I'll obviously hand over to final thoughts from the rest of the guys.
No, your final thoughts?
Me? Was it me?
Mute. Come off mute, Elite.
Oh, Lisa, sorry.
Sorry.
Have you got any final thoughts, or are you quiet?
No, I don't think I have any final thoughts. Just be trying to get my head out the door, Dave. After all your praise earlier, that was a bit too much. But yeah. But yeah, no, I think I don't really have much more to add. I think as I alluded to before, it's an interesting but difficult job being a selector, and it should, I suppose, also be noted that everyone that does these kind of jobs, and any kind of job actually within Table Tennis Scotland, it's all voluntary, which and I think that's something that often gets forgotten about, that all people who sit on these kinds of committees and make these decisions, which are not easy to make, and as Mark alluded to, many hours of debate I think go into these. So yeah, I don't think it's like a quick decision. We've had a good few debates and different viewpoints coming in, but yeah, also all people who are volunteers and who just want to give something back to the sport. So yeah, I think that's my last thoughts.
Good. Okay, I'm going to ask Stephen to just before, and Stephen's mentioned this so many times, I'm going to let Stephen close the show tonight, give him that responsibility, but we're always looking for non-playing captains. We're looking to train non-playing captains. As I've often said, if you're a little bit nervous and you think you'd like to be a non-playing captain, you can sit on the bench next to me or Stephen or Chris Main or one of our other experienced, just to get a feel of non-playing captain. So, and Stephen often says the same about the training camps too. Come along, see what's happening. We're not a closed shop. We want to see more of you, whether you're in Elgin or Aberdeen or Dundee, Perth, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, the Borders, Paddington. We want more coaches involved on the non-playing captain side, and we will help you to be those non-playing captains. Okay, Stephen, you're going to final thoughts, and you're going to close the show.
Thanks for the order of that, Dave. I was gonna. I know we put a bit of peer pressure on Lisa to get her in on that WhatsApp group. yesterday, and she's the only one of the other selectors that didn't bottle it, and I think she's done a great job tonight. I think you should get her on every week now, Dave and Mark. I think you got another one to add to your team there, regular. So good job, Lisa. Yeah, enjoyed the show, guys. Great discussion, topic selection, and so many things that we could talk about there and go on for quite a while. I really appreciate the comments around the online stuff from Mark and things like that, and the positive feedback coming through. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing the coaches on Wednesday, and forward to seeing the players on tomorrow and on over the weekend with that Home Nations E-Camp as well. So good luck. Well done, guys, for keeping the shows going every Monday. And good luck with your show next week and going forward as well. So have a good evening, everyone.
Steve, Mark, who have we got next week?
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to make that point because I think I don't know why we keep giving ourselves controversy every week, but next week we're in the world of ping pong. So our guests are Chris Duran, who got to the semi-finals of the recent World Ping Pong Masters. Gavin Rumgay is joining us, who got to semi-finals of the Ping Pong Masters. And then the commentator of it all, Colin Wilson, is back, who's been on the show before, is back with us. And we hope to have a member of the Johnston family, maybe Derek, who was referee, but they've been championing ping pong in Scotland. So we're using the channel to talk about that event. A different type of format, I think we've discussed, Dave, where maybe more of a match of the day, where we're not going to debate ping pong over table tennis as much as people want us to do so. It's more about the event that took place in Coventry a few weeks ago and the fact that our number one player, Gavin, was involved in it. And it's great to have him on the show. Chris Duran's always worth his money when you listen to him. So it's getting these guys' thoughts on that event alone and how they found it and maybe analysing some of the matches or the great matches that they were involved in, which is shown live on Sky Sports. So hopefully the viewers tune in next week, but I think we might have a lively one. Next Tuesday, yes. Instead of a Monday, next Tuesday.
Okay then,